I can't think of the last time that I needed more than one shot. And not that I got the game every time, but usually with a squirrel, if you take a shot and miss, well, it's gone. And what are you going to do? Open up along this limb as he runs along the limb or something? Tell me what fun is that? Plus, it's not safe.
Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Podcast U.S. I'm your host, Brent, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat with the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. And I'm joined today by my co-host, Roy Huntington. Hello there, Roy.
Howdy, let's get to it.
Let's get to it. But first, before we do, quick word from our great sponsor, Tango Down.
Tango Down has been a trusted leader in firearms parts and accessories for more than 2 decades. Whether you're upgrading your everyday carry or finishing out your next rifle build, Tango Down has you covered. Their product line continues to grow with new releases coming in 2026. Visit tangodown.com to explore the full lineup and sign up for email updates so you don't miss what's next. Tango Down, combat gear without peer.
Okay, today we're going to jump right in, and this is a topic Roy kind of suggested, and I thought, I get that question all the time, so we're going to address it today. And that simple question is, okay, I'm going to buy my first 22 for me, my spouse, my child, whomever, the kid down the block, I don't know, but do I want a single shot? Do I want a bolt action? Do I want a semi-auto? Or a full auto? Okay. And no, nobody asked that question, but we're going to give you some advice on what is the best 22 out of the gate. And I would say, I'm going to throw it to you, Roy, but really I think it depends on the recipient of said rifle more so than the person doing the buying. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I agree. I think people make a really bad mistake when they've got, a 10-year-old boy or girl, and the first thing they do is buy them a Ruger 1022.
Yeah.
And, it just teaches them to make empty brass. Bang, 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 bang. Nobody's learning sight picture. Nobody's learning trigger squeeze, So you're right. I think it is situationally dependent. And so, my recommendation, I'm sure yours is the same. First 22 for somebody adolescent or below should be a single shot 22 bolt action rifle or a single shot break open 22 rifle if you can find one, because that just slows everything down. If you give them a box of 50 22s, that's going to last them quite a while. Yeah. And, it'll let them learn sight picture, learn trigger squeeze. So, and having said that, it's also not a bad idea if you're an adult. In other words, if this really is your first 22 rifle, then go get some Savage bolt action 22 single shot, or maybe a bolt action tube feed or magazine feed gun, but because everything slows down.
Yeah. Well, the great analogy, and talking about my personal life, but this kind of relates. I started Tai Chi recently. Thought I'd try it. Seemed interesting. And I had my first class the other day, and a lot of people ask, how did you do? And I said, I felt like a spastic baby giraffe out there. Tai Chi is that very flowing thing. And I'm like, and it wasn't that I'm not, I think I'm semi-intelligent, and it's not rocket surgery, but it's a whole new learning curve that I've never been part of. And trying to take everything in, it really struck me. I thought, okay, I know I'm going to be a little behind the curve and try to follow, but something that seemed so simple, like doing forms or maybe shooting a 22, it's not just doing it, it's everything that goes with it. And then I got to admit, I didn't think that there'd be any self-consciousness, because that's not kind of me, but I was very self-conscious because it's like, I felt like everybody in the gym was watching me. And we tend to forget that new shooters are the same way. Even adults, I don't care what people think. We do. Most humans do care what people think, whether it's a group of onlookers or it's the instructor, if you're teaching somebody. So we've got to put our place in place of the recipient, of the new shooter. And, I think that's why that single shot is such a great idea, because it's slow, as you said, Roy, it slows everything down. If you start adding magazines and you especially start adding a semi-auto, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening, and that's how people kind of start shutting down. We often called it, in emergency services, drinking from the fire hose. It's pretty hard to drink from that fire hose. So if you cut it down to a garden hose, the person that's learning tends to do better.
Well, you don't go out and buy a $50,000 set of Snap-on tools if you think you want to change the air filter in your car.
Yeah.
I mean,
Though
you buy
people do though. It's insane.
Do, yeah. I mean, you buy a $5 socket set from Harbor Freight, and then while you learn how to use the socket, and so, and there's some mechanical things too. I think. Like a single shot 22 rifle, if it's of good quality, is usually extremely accurate. And so if you upgrade the fixed sights and put an aperture on, or eventually put a scope on it or something, you'll have a gun that'll last you the rest of your life. I still shoot my original Remington Model 514 that I got when I was 10 years old, single shot bolt action 22. I shoot it pretty regularly still. It's still a lot of fun. So I found, the average inexpensive, affordable 22 is not as accurate as a bolt action 22. And so, if you buy a Savage something bolt action 22 and then a run of the mill semi-automatic 22, the bolt gun will more than likely outshoot the semi-auto. And I think that can be an eye-opening experience for people. And so if you've done the single shot rifle, now you think, oh, now I'm going to get a semi-automatic, something from here, and you get it and you shoot that first group and it's like, what's going on? Well, I mean, unless you're going to spend $1,000 and get, a custom kind of 1022 or something like that, something that Volkwartson's doing, that gun's not going to shoot as well as your bolt action. And then as you grow, I think you're going to want, like I have a couple of Anschutz 22 rifle bolt guns and a CZ, and all of that is based on the experience you had from your early days. And if your early days was banging away with some semi-auto 22 where you never learned sight picture, you never learned trigger squeeze, you bought ammo bulk cheap, right? So you never learned how to gauge different ammo and everything. So it won't be as fun. And I see people lose interest. They just go, yeah, okay, yeah, big deal. Right.
Yeah. I think that's the big thing, that if people start out with the best equipment and multiple shot capability, where do you go from there? But if you start single shot, and again, start with good quality, it doesn't have to be the best, but a decent quality single shot, or like you said, at least a 22 bolt gun that, they can't just dump ammo. Then once they'll build competency faster because there's less going on. And then they start thinking, well, boy, I'd really like one of those, semi-autos. I want a 1022, or, I want a lever action or something like that. And it builds in steps. And that's one of those things that I think that's a common thread that goes through everything we talk about, Roy, is, I guess, to encapsulate one of my favorite lines is slow down, speed racer. And we've all had buddies. I had a buddy that if he got into a certain type of fishing, he'd go out and buy $500 fishing rods. And there was one time we were out fishing in my boat and he got really frustrated because anybody that fishes knows if there's two guys in a boat, one's going to catch all the fish and one's not. It seems to work out that way. So I was pulling him in left and right. We were pan fishing and he got so mad. He started beating this very expensive rod on the side of the boat and reared back. I said, if you throw that in, I'm diving in to get it. Well, fine. And he literally, as you always say, Roy, he threw down his sucker and just sat there. And then he saw me still catching fish. So it was that thing that he was, firmly convinced that better quality equipment made up for his lack of skill. And I think that's kind of the big thing that we fight against almost all the time. Better equipment will make the expert better, but it's not really going to do anything for the beginner or the intermediate, and it actually might be counterproductive.
Well, and you said lever gun, and that's a category I kind of forgot about. A lever gun is an interesting blend of all of these categories, although you will find the average lever action 22 to not be as accurate as a good quality bolt action, but it'll be adequate. I mean, that's a good. Henry makes a really cool little mini lever action. It's great for kids. Same thing, slows them down. You can look over the hammer's cocked. You know that the gun's cocked. It's easy. It's good for safety. But people say, the thing I hear is like, oh, well, I wouldn't want a single shot 22 because I go squirrel hunting and I want the ability to have follow-up shots. And it's like, I mean, I can't think of the last time that I needed more than one shot, and not that I got the game every time. But usually with a squirrel, if you take a shot and miss, well, it's gone.
Yeah.
And what are you going to do? Open up along this limb as he runs along the limb or something? Tell me what fun is that? Plus, it's not safe.
Exactly.
So, go ahead, play with the semi-autos and stuff. And maybe if you're chasing jackrabbits in the high desert, it's kind of fun to chase him with a semi-automatic 22. If you're doing some weekend competition, there's a lot of times where they use semi-automatic 22s for that kind of stuff. So don't hate me. I'm not saying don't buy a semi-auto 22, but what this is about is what do you think you should buy? What's your first 22? So, I mean, honestly, if you're already a shooter, and you have guns and you understand it, I would recommend, if you really don't have a 22, which would amaze me, right? Yeah. But I would recommend that you spend some money and get a good quality, either a tuned Volkwarzen 1022 base gun if you want semi-auto, or a CZ or an Anschutz, or even a good Savage 22. I would recommend you spend the money, get a good, accurate 22 rifle, put a scope on it that costs more than the rifle. You will be happy the rest of your life.
Exactly.
It'll be so satisfying. Yeah.
Yep.
So,
well, you talk about squirrel hunting. I'm a big squirrel hunter, and if it's one thing to miss, but if you hit a squirrel and you don't hit it good, and they invariably, like you said, they run or they immediately dive into a knothole someplace and you've lost it. To me, that is such a failure. It almost ruins my day. So, especially, really, it should be that way with any kind of hunting. And we've talked about this a lot, is it should be the one shot, one kill ethos. And there are times where you have to take a follow up, but if you're doing it right, whether you're talking elk or squirrel, you really need to be good enough, be the loose nut behind the gun, that you're good enough that most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you're putting the game down with a single shot. So the only time I would say a follow-up shot is really important if you're hunting Cape buffalo or elephant or lion. Yeah, that's a different deal.
Don't use your semi-auto 22 for that. Sometimes I have people here, and I'll break out my old single-shot Remington Model 514. Of course, they have terrible open sights, a bead with the shallow U thing on the rear. But once you learn how to hold those sights, they're actually good. I scoped one of these guns. I milled it to where I was able to install a scope on an old 514 Remington, and the darn thing shoots like a laser beam.
Wow.
I mean, it'll shoot 3/4 of an inch at 50 yards, and so the gun's capable, right?
Yeah.
But I have people say, oh, you can't hit anything with those guns because, they're just single shot 22s and they have terrible sights and all that. Well, I have a spinner target at it's 85 yards here that is for 22, and I always just go, let's see, bang, tink, bang, tink, bang, tink at 100 yards. And it's not because I'm brilliant. Of course, I've shot this gun 50,000 times.
Yeah.
But it teaches you to do that. In other words, if you know this is what your limitations are, then you're going to learn to shoot this gun up to its ability. And then once you do that, now when you buy a really good gun, like you say, good equipment will help somebody who's already proficient. They'll gain that extra 5% or whatever it is. And so, I mean, it's 22s are for fun. So don't agonize over it. But I just recommended the other day somebody, the last time he shot, he was a kid. That was like 40 years ago. He said, I was thinking of buying a 22 rifle, and he was going to buy a kind of a high-end semi-auto 22. And I said, Rick, you don't have a lot of experience shooting these guns. I really recommend you get, Savage makes a really cool single shot 22 rifle with aperture sights and stuff. And I said, just go buy one of those and go to the range, learn to shoot it, relax, have some fun, and then move on to something else. And so I guess it was more than recently. It was a couple months ago. And so he did just that. And he told me, he said, this is so much fun, and
what?
He
fun? Guns aren't supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be tactical.
He said an added advantage, though, he says, is ammunition's cheap, and I don't, I mean, if he said, if I go to the range, I shoot a 50-round box of ammunition, that's like an hour.
Yeah.
And so he said it's great fun. So there we go. It works.
There you go. It does work. And we'd like to hear your thoughts or questions. You can reach out to us if you're watching on YouTube. Of course, as I've said often, Roy makes it his daily chore to go through all those comments. And I look through them too. But you can also reach us. Email editor@gunspodcast.us. And I can answer those or triage them, send them over to Roy if you want to hear what Roy's got to say. But anyway, I think we're both in agreement. For folks starting out, the low round count, single shot, but decent quality 22 is the way to go. Save the semi-auto for when somebody gets a little more proficient. So any final tag on that, Roy?
No, I think, just because it's single shot doesn't mean it's not good.
Exactly.
Truly. And, or a bolt action. If, a bolt action with a magazine or something, that's fine. That'd be a great starter rifle, even for a kid. As a matter of fact, I had a test gun here not too long ago. It was a 22 rifle. It was actually made for kids. It was a semi-automatic 22 rifle made for kids. Well, it came with a magazine that only held one round.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. And so they got experience loading a magazine, experience learning how to run the action and all that kind of stuff. And then they shot, and they only had one shot. So they didn't just go bang, 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 right?
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? That's clever. And you could adapt that. If you're really convinced you want your kid to have a 10/22 for the first time, that's fine. But make them load one round in the magazine while they learn to shoot the gun. Yep. So, all right. Mostly have fun with it, though.
Exactly. I say it a lot. Gun and fun are one letter apart, and they should be. And we tend to lose that nowadays. So anyway, thanks for joining us here on Guns Podcast U.S. Of course, we have to give a shout out to our great sponsor, Tango Down.
Visit tangodown.com to explore the full lineup and sign up for email updates so you don't miss what's next. Tango Down, combat gear without peer.
So, as I said, thanks for joining us. And on behalf of my official co-host, Roy Huntington, I'm Guns Podcast U.S. host, Brent Wheat. Stumbled over my words there. But anyway, regardless if I can talk or not, this is Guns Podcast U.S. And as I always end the episode, now get out there and get shooting.